Welcome to Grit in the Wild podcast, episode 3. I am one of your hosts, Melissa Short.
And I'm your co host, Adam Short, and welcome to Grit in the Wild. We're happy to have you here to join us in our journey as we talk through spiritual abuse, religious trauma, high control groups, and a lot of the pain and just unpacking of those journeys that we've walked through ourselves and hoping that it connects with you and your journey, especially as you peel back the layers of deconstruction and toxic faith. So, one of our goals is to help reclaim our power and make new meaning out of the experiences we've had. So, in the previous episode, I had the opportunity to share some of my story that went back quite a few years to when I was a missionary in Africa. And today we want to hear some of Melissa's story of her kind of process of walking through some tough stuff. So, looking forward to having y'all with us today and unpacking and hearing Melissa's story.
Yeah, it's like where to start.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about like initially how our stories are so different, like our backgrounds. I love that we always talk about that. It's kind of cool
How
how,
so?
well, just our upbringings, our, spiritual journeys, and then, yeah, just kind of getting to that point and then where our paths cross.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I guess I'll kind of jump in and share. I'll kind of start at the beginning
Yeah. Because
because
that's what I did.
that's where you start, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like basically, I think I shared I grew up in California. I grew up in a, I guess, Christian family. I would say, yeah, my parents are Christians. Christ was talked about. We went to church when I was little. I felt like I was saved, like I've always believed in Jesus for as long as I can remember. So yeah, like that was very much a part of our home. I would say like, how do I describe that? Like we went to church, we prayed, we acknowledged Christ, but that was kind of the extent of our faith. Like it didn't really go much deeper than that.
Yeah.
And so
Celebrated Easter,
yeah, Easter,
Christmas.
Christmas, all the things, but yeah, that was kind of the extent, like not a lot of emphasis, right, on like a personal relationship or much more than that. We stopped going to church when I was really young. So I want to say, I can't even remember. I want to say by the time I was maybe like 7 or 8 or even younger, we kind of just started going like once a year on Easter. So I really didn't grow up in the church.
Yeah.
That was just the extent of my faith. It was like, I'm saved and I'm going to heaven.
And where did you grow up for
Oh,
the audience?
California. I
Yeah.
think I said
You've
that.
said that before.
Yeah, so I grew up in California. So yeah, so that was kind of the extent of my faith growing up. Went to church when I was little, believed in Jesus. We stopped going to church and it was like the once a year on Easter. And then even that kind of faded out. So I didn't grow up with all this like purity culture stuff and
Mm.
youth group and camps. Like I never had any of that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
so yeah, so kind of like fast forwarding. Um, yeah, like my teen years, I had a really kind of wild and crazy teen years. I know you and I have talked about that. I was really rebellious. I was partying, drinking, very promiscuous, drugs, all of that stuff. Like just living a really, really dark lifestyle. Like when I look back on that time in my life, it was a very dark season for me.
Yeah.
Um, just a lot of like had very low self-esteem, a lot of low self-worth. Just really no anchor, just kind of,
Mm-hmm.
just thought that was normal and just kind of was in survival mode a lot of those years. And so again, kind of like fast forwarding into my 20s after high school, I moved to Southern California to Huntington Beach to live with some of my girlfriends. And during that time, I was in beauty school and I was really depressed. So like that kind of lifestyle really took a toll on me, like, partying, going to bars, all of that. Like it was just really empty.
Mm.
And I found myself kind of around 20, 21. And yes, that was before you're even legally allowed to drink.
Yeah. Minor detail.
Minor detail, but there's ways to work around that. And my friends and I, that's the kind of people we were. We were finding our ways. So yeah, during that time, I think that just kind of took a toll on me. And I remember being in beauty school at the time in Southern California. And I remember driving to school, getting to the point where things were so bad that I drove to beauty school and I got in the parking lot and I had such social anxiety at that point that I couldn't even go into school.
Wow.
And I
I don't
had to
think you've ever
drive
told me
home.
that before.
Yeah, it was really bad. Like I was really depressed. I
Huh.
remember calling my mom at points and I was like, I would just cry. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong. Like something's wrong. Like I just felt like there was something wrong with me.
Mm.
So just kind of painting a picture like of my that where I was at that point. I was drinking bottles
Hmm.
of wine by myself at night, living by myself. It was just really sad and empty. And I had a friend in beauty school, like randomly invite me to church. She had started going to church. She's like, "Hey," and it was Easter. She's like, "Do you want to come to church?" And I was
Yeah.
like, well, "Hey,
Why not?
I've been in like 20 years. Sure, why not?" Well, not that long, but I hadn't been in a long
Yeah, because if you stopped
time.
going between the age of 6 and
Yeah.
8, by that time you're what, 21, you said?
Yeah. So it had been a long
15
time.
plus or
Yeah.
minus 15 years.
Yeah. So I was like, sure, maybe I'll get back into church. So um I went with her to that service. And I love telling this part of my story because I had not been to church in so many years,
Oh,
but
yeah,
like
that's right.
I wore like a long skirt, and no offense if you wear like long skirts and that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. This isn't a commentary on your dress, but for me, I thought like I need to look really holy. So I wore the long skirts and the long thing and didn't dress how I dressed.
That's how
Yeah.
you thought people were supposed to dress.
Yeah.
Like that was your idea. Okay, I'm gonna go to church and
Yeah.
I'm gonna put on my Sunday best, as it were.
And so I walk into this church. This was in Orange County, California. And I walk in and I remember my jaw almost dropping because there's like girls with like right cleavage hanging out and tank tops and people in jeans. And I hadn't experienced like that church could be like young and trendy and cool. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is church. And
Hmm.
it was kind of an eye-opening experience for me. But that service was really a moment, right, where like my
Yeah.
life really changed. And so, um, yeah, in that service, there was I don't know, kind of like dance program. Like, so no one was preaching, no one was praying for me, but I observed this kind of like lyrical dance. And I remember the significance of it. It was like this girl out in the rain and she was sad and doing this dance and someone came with an umbrella and like covered her. And I just remember watching that and I just remember being overtaken in that moment with, I believe, God's presence. I felt like all of the hardness and pain just kind of melted in that moment. Like I would had an encounter with the Lord. And I just remember crying, like the floodgate just opened and being really touched by the presence of God in that moment.
Hmm.
And it was a really powerful moment where I knew in that moment that God was what I was missing and what I needed, and
Hmm.
He was touching me. And again, it was kind of like makes me think of your story. Like there
Yeah.
wasn't anything that anybody was telling me in that
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
wasn't anybody praying for me. It was like this sovereign just moment with the Holy Spirit,
Yep.
where God touched me physically. I physically felt His presence. I felt a warm presence
Mm.
wash over
I
me.
love that.
And yeah, so I mean, it was very impactful. I left that service and I knew something had happened. I knew God had touched me. And so, long story short, the next week I went back and I gave my life to Christ. And it was really drastic for me. So I went from like, right, drinking, partying, being promiscuous, super depressed, all of that to overnight I just
Hmm.
everything changed. I
Yeah.
like at the time, again, this isn't a commentary on whether or not you cuss, but like I like cussed like a sailor and I just overnight I'm like I don't want to do that anymore. Like I remember going to my cupboard and grabbing the bottle of wine and I was like I can't do this anymore. Like I just didn't want to.
Yeah.
Like nobody told me. No one was discipling me at this point. It was just really a work of the Holy Spirit and just really a powerful encounter that I had with the Lord. So from
Hmm.
that moment on, that was 2005, that I met the Lord on Easter, and my life drastically changed. So I went from being one way to another way literally overnight.
Yeah.
And I just went full force into, I got back into church, right? I'm reading the Bible really for the first time. Like, I never in my life read the scriptures on my own or took time to pray really.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was like a huge, huge change for me. That was really when I feel like my journey with God started. I just want to share this other piece. Like, I remember, opening up the Bible in my room at that time, and I would read for like 4 or 5 hours. It makes me
Wow.
think of your prayer time, like,
Yeah.
right? And I would just weep because I was like, it was such good news to me. And what I love about looking back on that, and there was nobody that I could credit that for. Like, there
Yep.
was nobody telling me, go home and read your Bible and pray. It was just, I just wanted to. I
Yeah.
just had that desire. And
Makes
so,
sense.
yeah, that was like kind of where my God journey began.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. I love how you had a sovereign encounter. We have that in common.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have that
Yeah.
experience where whether it's in a church setting or it's, some random place in your room or out in the woods or wherever, or driving down the road, like that happens. That kind of
Yeah.
stuff happens. And especially in areas where, and not just areas like this, but especially areas where people don't have the opportunity to hear the gospel. Like you hear of those stories
Yeah.
happening, but I love, that was your experience. And I love how it was like inside out. And
Yeah.
it's not like you had somebody beating something over your head that said, hey, you've got to do this, that, and the other. It's just, it was the fruit of God taking up residence inside of you that, created such a dramatic transformation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's so cool.
Yeah. I really
So,
experienced like the whole, like, I was one way one day and the
yeah.
next day I was another way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I remember several times you mentioning how I think you said you identified with the passage in the Bible where Jesus said to him, what is it for him or her or whoever who's sinned much loves much?
Yes.
I remember
Yes.
you mentioning that to
Yeah.
me, like because you felt like you left such a very, as you said, dark story or dark past, and then all of a sudden you're transformed.
Yeah, definitely. Like, the shame that I was living in was so intense. And to like experience that encounter with grace and have that shame literally lift off, like, it was such good news to me. It was
Mm.
so life-giving to be freed of that and know that, hey, like, my past is taken care of. Like, it's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we say in the South, is done with. So that was to place us in the timeline. That was 2005.
Yeah.
Where do you want to go from here? Do you want to pick it up, continue, or do you want to skip anywhere, or
Yeah,
what
I'm
do you
trying to
want to
think
talk
where I
about?
should go from here, like, kind of looking at the time. So, yeah, I'll kind of share, kind of maybe meet up to the point where our paths cross a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, so yeah, 2005, met the Lord. I was living in Southern California at the time. I'm from Northern California, so it's about an 8-hour time difference. So I moved shortly after that, finished beauty school, moved back up north to be with my family again in Napa. And I attend a church. I get involved in a church in my hometown, which was a really positive experience. One of my more positive experiences with church, I would have to say. Like, I feel like I really got discipled there.
Mm.
A lot of women took me under their wing, and I'm to this day still in connection with them. They taught me how to pray. They taught me about Jesus, and just really, I felt like a pretty solid, like, beginning to
Foundation.
my faith. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was really loved in that community. It was very family oriented. They gave me a lot of opportunities to serve and grow in my gifts and things.
Yeah.
And one thing I forgot to add is, like, shortly after I met the Lord, I remember, kind of like you, I felt a significant calling. Like, again, nobody was telling me any of this. Nobody was talking to me about.
You didn't respond to like an altar call
No,
to
like, I was
this?
not in a charismatic, I didn't get saved in a charismatic type church. It
Yeah.
was like very just your normal evangelical kind of mega church. But um again, so I just had this sense from the Lord that, like, I'm gonna go to Bible school. I kind of always knew that I wanted to. And so, fast forwarding, I'm involved in this really good community. And it wasn't a mega church. It was a couple hundred people. So it was small enough that I knew the pastor, I knew his wife, I knew the
Yeah.
people, we knew each other.
Right.
And it was a really positive experience. Got to experience my first missions trips and things like that.
Yeah.
Involved in different kind of ministries, youth group and women's ministry and prayer minute, all of the I was there all the time. Like it was my life. Like I went from
Yeah.
like the bar life to
Church life.
life. And
Yeah.
I was there all the time. I was single. So I was there, all day Sunday and Wednesday and just whenever the doors were open. And so that was a really positive experience, but that desire kept growing in me for more. I wanted to go, I thought, to Bible college. And again, kind of fast forwarding, long story short, I one of the my friends in the church, he was our worship leader, introduced me to a ministry.
I wonder which ministry that is.
Do I say it? I'm like, yeah, I guess it's kind of obvious.
Say it.
To Bethel.
If you won't.
Bethel Church in Reading.
Bethel. Yeah.
So I kind of like my friend had started going and was telling us how awesome it was and just all the powerful things God was doing there. And being curious and excited, and hungry, a group of us went up, started going up to services there in Reading. And it was just amazing at the time, right? Like, again, like, oh, and I should say that I was part of an Assemblies of God church at that church
in Napa.
So the
NorCal.
Kind of an Assemblies background. And so Bethel was not part of Assemblies, but it used to be.
It used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it exited the AOG.
Yeah.
I don't know when it was. I want to say it was 90s. I don't know for
Really?
sure.
I think it might have been more later than that. I
It
feel
could-
like it was maybe in the early 2000s.
You know what? I think you're right.
Because
yeah,
I feel like people at that time, there was still enough connection where,
yeah.
Anyways, so started going to the services on Sunday night at Reading, a group of us, and we were just getting rocked. Like we were experiencing God. The worship there was amazing. Hours of stuff, really, really hungry. And so, yeah, we wanted that. And we kind of tried to bring some of that stuff to our church. And it didn't really go well. Like there was definitely the people there. There was a group of people that wanted that. And there was a group of people that really did not like that.
Right.
And I remember people kind of warning me, like, be careful. I'm not sure about that. And I was like, and
yeah.
I was just like, oh, it's fine. And I prayed about stuff. I was like, I don't see anything wrong. I don't see they're doing anything against the Bible or anything like that. And so a friend of mine, this friend that introduced me, he went ahead and told me, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to school here. I applied and I got accepted. And I was like, and a few of my friends at that time were leaving. So it was kind of like one of those things where like, well, all the people I'm close with are kind of like branching out. And I just on a whim thought, you know what? I want to apply and see what happens. And it was totally out of left field. And
this was what year?
This was 2008. So I was like, I had a full-time, so I was a hairstylist. I had a business, a fully booked hair business that was doing really well. And I was very involved with my church. Like there was no reason really for me to leave.
Yeah, because you had just been in SoCal.
Yeah, within 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really fast. It was like May 2008. I applied to Bethel on a whim.
Yeah.
And I had to get a pastor's recommendation. And I'll never forget, I went to my pastor and I had a good relationship with my pastor. And he was like, are you sure this is what you want to do? He's like, I will write you the recommendation, but I will warn you. And he again, he wasn't critical, but he was very much like, be careful, like, be aware. I have concerns about it, I think is what he said.
Yeah.
And so looking back, like,
should you have listened?
Maybe I should have heeded. I'm glad I didn't.
But then
listen.
we wouldn't have met.
I'm glad I didn't listen. So, but that's a paradox.
Like
that's like
the silver linings that happen in your story that you look back and you see all this crazy stuff that happens, but then you're like, oh, but that happened too.
Yeah, it's like
the good things. I mean, not that.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a hard thing. We should talk about that sometime.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Yeah, I went ahead and went. He wrote me the recommendation and I got accepted out of the blue. And I literally had 6 weeks to pack up my life. I like had to figure out what am I going to do to provide for myself? I've got to find a place to live. Um, so long story short, I moved to Redding, California and leave my family and my church home and my
Business. Yep.
business to step out and not knowing, not having a lot of assurances to go and be at this place called Bethel.
Yeah.
Really, just having been introduced to it. So yeah, that's kind of where our stories intersect.
Yep.
So
Yep. You were the girl next door.
so yeah, just a little bit like maybe I'll just share a little bit how we met.
You can. Go
So
for it.
this friend, which I won't mention just for his privacy,
Yeah.
but anyways, this friend knew Adam. Like you guys got connected, and you guys were looking for a place. My roommates and I had found a place, and this friend was like, "We can't find a place." I was like, "Well, you guys need to check out this place." And so he called, and you guys got connected, and you guys ended up moving. And so we were literally next door neighbors.
Yep.
So that was 2008, and you were a
Yeah.
year ahead. So this was going to be your second year, right?
Yep.
And I was going into first year.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my good friend talking about you all the time. He's like, "Oh, Adam, blah, 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 blah." And I'm in my mind, I'm thinking, I need to meet this Adam guy. Like, he sounds very interesting.
And I heard about you through him, and I remember him saying, "Gosh, well, this apartment complex that Melissa found is got to be pretty nice because she's classy." So I'm like, okay, the girl next door. First day I met you, you knocked on the door, and I think y'all needed help with your washing machine or something.
Yeah, I kind of was like finding a reason to go over.
Okay.
I was like, I've got to find a reason to meet Adam and see who this Adam person is. And so I did. And yeah, I think there was a spark from the
Oh
beginning
yeah, for
for
sure.
sure.
Yep, I liked her the day I met her.
And I was like, I kind of feel like I liked you before I met you in a way because
They're
of all the
sweet.
things I heard about you. But
Well, before we send our audience into limbo land or crazy land because we're drooling over each other, what happened? Like, how does that tie to, or where do you want to go from here as far
yeah,
as
where do I
like,
go in my
because we
story?
got Bethel, BSSM, all that. You want to talk about that, or you want to go
I
beyond
don't know.
that?
Yeah, I feel like should I talk about that because I know you have a lot to say about that too. But yeah, like I mean,
We can do either one. Yeah.
so yeah, so went to Bethel. We're next door neighbors. We can talk about our little
Yeah.
love story another time, but but we met there. Yeah, I did 2 years of ministry school there. And yeah, so 2008 to 9 and then 9 to 10. I finished ministry school in 2010. We got
Yep.
engaged that year and we stayed one more year. So the year that we were engaged slash getting married, you were done with your third because it's a 3 year program for those of you who don't know. You can do 1, 2, or 3 years. You don't have to do them all. So I chose to finish at 2 years and you did the third year, which was an internship.
Right.
So he was finishing his third year. I finished my second year. We had just gotten married. And yeah, I don't really know what to say. Like our experience at Bethel was actually a very positive one
Yep.
while we were there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was probably one of the happiest times of my life.
Yeah, it was truly an amazing place when we were there for sure.
Yeah, like looking back on my experience there, like my relationship with the Lord went really deep. I feel like some of the good things that I gained out of my time in Reading were a lot of friendships, a lot of really good, solid friendships at that time.
Yeah.
You, of course. And then I feel like they really fostered an environment for you to really deepen your relationship with the Lord and Holy Spirit. So um, yeah, that was really a season of deepening for me with the Lord. Really a season of developing my gifts, like growing in courage with evangelism and things like that.
Yeah.
So I feel, and then I feel like relationally, I feel like they had a lot of strengths.
Yeah.
Like I
They
feel like
did.
they taught me a lot about communication and boundaries.
Yeah.
And I feel like you and I have talked, like as far as our marriage, like we were very well equipped for a marriage.
True.
Like the people who did the premarital there were like amazing.
Yeah, they were.
So yeah, we felt really like those were some really awesome things about our time there. And so we left there like really like felt ready to take on the world and like
Yeah.
really excited and really filled up and ready to go. And
But I hear a butt coming.
but yeah, so we
So
it's
can
a
I
lot. Yeah.
yeah, can I pause
You
there?
jump in
Just
there.
well, I was just
Yes.
gonna kind of try to connect these two
Hmm.
seasons. If you're
Yeah.
gonna go to the
No,
next season,
go for it.
so you know, several amazing years together in Reading, right?
Mhm.
And I'll agree with that. Like I had an amazing experience at Bethel as well. Incredible relationships, incredible, you know, experience from this, the God factor, like encountering God, watching him do stuff in people's lives, experiencing him in my life, which was key for me because I had just come off the mission field
Yeah.
in 2007 from Africa. And so there's a lot of rebuilding, reconstruction that had to happen in my life that had been torn down. So that was really key for me. But, to your point, like we were so pumped, full of a belief that we were going to go export this whole ecosystem at Bethel to somewhere else.
Yeah, it felt like a spiritual Disneyland. Like I know
Yeah.
it's interesting because there's some sites that we've been on and little experiences we've heard from people where they did not have a good experience there.
Yeah.
Like while they were there, it was not good.
Lots of people
A
actually.
lot of people.
Yeah.
And so for us it was different. And so we were like for like us it was like a spiritual Disneyland and like you know really a bubble, like this bubble of feels like this perfect world is that's how I would describe it. I know that's not everyone's experience, but we really felt like this
Yeah.
is the most amazing place. And don't you remember like kind of your last year at school, like the highest thing you can do is get a position at Bethel.
On
Like
staff. Yeah.
you feel like looking back, I see how toxic that is
Yeah, it really is.
and cultish, like to your highest place you can reach is to remain in the system at the top.
It's to work your way up the echelon of the ladder, right? Of okay, I'm getting recognized, I'm getting more favors on your life, and move your way up the corporate ladder, so to speak, at Bethel. And so yeah, I think all of us, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us included, had that
Yeah.
dream. Oh, I hope they pick me to be on staff.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. Like, yeah, and we'll definitely unpack a lot of different Bethel things.
Yeah.
A lot. We have a
There's
lot. We have a
There's
lot to unpack.
There
with
is
that.
a dump truck load full, multiple dump truck loads full of that.
Yeah.
But we do want to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
Sorry, I feel like I'm stealing your thunder here.
Because this is kind of where our story intersects, so it's fine.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like I just felt like it was important to say, like, we left again, like just painting a picture. We were like, I would say, like, really for me looking back, like super proud. I was like,
We're Bethel.
student. I'm gonna
We're signed, sealed, and delivered, baby. We're commissioned revivalists, and we're gonna go teach them how it's done.
Yeah.
I mean, hearing myself say that out loud right now, it sounds so ridiculous. Like to think that you can have that kind of arrogance to like, oh yeah, we've got it figured out. We're gonna come, and I don't think that was the heart. Like I think that it was well intentioned. I think it was sincere. But the problem is you can be well intentioned and sincere, but sincerely wrong or sincerely off base.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. So just unrealistic, again, unrealistic, like magical unicorn idea of ministry and life after that.
Right.
Our time that we're like, we're going to take on the world for God.
Yeah.
But so anyways, yeah, it's like where to bring in Texas. So
Yeah.
Texas, holy
It's a whole
cow.
thing. It's the whole thing.
Are
we going there?
We got 31 minutes to squeeze in some Texas right now.
Yeah, and just so y'all know, just before we get into this, we're going to have multiple rounds of unpacking bits and pieces of this. But what we're trying to do here is both of us share a little bit from our story.
Yeah.
I've only shared up to Africa. I hadn't even gotten to Bethel yet, which is fine. I wanted to give her a chance to share some of her story. But this next phase we're going to talk about is a very key phase in our life because it literally became definitive. I don't know if definitive is the right word, but very defining, right?
Yeah.
Of our the trajectory of our life from then and even to now. Like
Yeah.
it's still so deeply baked
Whew.
in us that I mean, to say the word Texas, man, almost feels like an
It's the
expletive.
shudders. Ooh, it's like the re-traumatization of
Yeah.
talking about your
But this is one of the reasons we signed up to do this, that we decided to do this, is because we want to share our story, because we know that we've heard from a lot of people that
Yeah.
y'all have gone through stuff like this too. And we're just trying to help each other process this,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
to whatever extent it can help, all the better.
Yeah. And it's hard to talk about. Like
It's
even
very
as I
hard.
as
Yeah.
as I just say the word Texas, I feel like
The
that
air
that
kind of
like,
gets,
oh, like do we go here? But yeah, you're right. It's why we're doing this, to help ourselves heal. Like
yeah,
telling your story is healing in the right context, right? Not
yeah.
just with anybody, because not everyone's going to understand, and that's really painful. To
And,
tell your
and,
story to people who don't get it,
and you
it's
know
like,
what? To be fair, no one person in the world is going to fully understand another
true.
person's whole story.
That's
I
true.
think that we all, if we have an empathy inside, right, we can identify and connect ourselves to another person's story, at least to an extent. But there's probably a continuum there of being able to relate to another, from one person to another.
Yeah,
Does
and
that
I
make
think
sense?
too, I've learned looking back, because I think prior to this Texas experience, I had not, as a Christian, really experienced any trials, hardship, um, anything like that. Like anything that really, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but
Hard
anything
stuff.
hard stuff that would cause empathy to be a result. And so I think it's important to remember too, like if you have not experienced something hard, it's very hard to even have empathy for somebody. Empathy, I think, is the ability to see something from somebody else's perspective. And so you're going to be much more empathetic when you have gone through something hard. Like you said, it's not that you maybe understand every piece, but you're going to have, like, again, that heart of like, I'm so sorry. Like,
Yeah.
so Texas.
Yeah. So why don't we get into it a little bit here?
So yeah,
Do we
so
want to set up the context of how it happened?
yeah, we'll talk about how we moved to Texas. Should we talk about this story of how we moved to Texas? Yeah.
I think it's relevant. I think it's relevant. I think there's a lot there that we've had to unlearn.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about is we had friends that we'll keep that light. Like we had some
Yeah.
friends that I would say spiritual parents that we had developed a relationship with, and they had moved from California to Texas, and they were kind of talking with us about moving out there, like, hey, like there could be a job situation here at this company. They were talking about a ministry school, and so we were building a relationship with them. So there was a lot of that going on. And we were like, at first, we had gone out to visit them.
Yeah.
I'm kind of all over the place. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
And
I'm tracking.
we had gone out to visit them just as friends, because we met them in California. They moved to Texas. We went out to visit them. And we went on that trip, and we were like not at all on our radar thinking about moving out there.
Yeah.
And we came home from that trip, and we felt like God started speaking to us about moving out there.
Yeah.
And it was like
It was
everywhere.
blatant.
Yeah.
Everywhere we looked, there was Texas everywhere. We interpreted that at the time to be God speaking to us,
Yeah.
through coincidences that, that looking back, maybe they were coincidences. I still believe that God led us to Texas.
I do
At
too.
the end of the
Yeah.
day, but anyway, so a lot of things like that we really felt strongly like we're supposed to move to Texas and do this. So, and that
Yeah.
was 2010 that we visited, and then we got married in January 2011, and then moved. We left Reading and moved to Texas, packed it all into a itty bitty Honda Civic, newlyweds, and we went southeast. Yeah, southeast.
Yeah.
We moved to Texas, and we had I didn't neither of us had a job lined up. You left your business for the second time because
Yeah.
by that time you
Yep.
had you still kept your hair business in Napa, and then you built a second business in Reading. So you had two hair businesses that you walked away from. And then, of course, I, you know, stepped down from my job in Reading, and we literally went in faith to Texas.
Well, I want to like paint the picture. For me, it was a little bit more because that was my first
That's
time
true.
leaving home.
True.
So
Yeah.
I left my culture.
That was the
I
first time you had lived outside of California.
Yes, I left my family, who my family's small and very close knit. That was a big, big sacrifice. So I left my family, left two businesses. We left Bethel, which was our community and our
The
friendships.
mothership.
And then we were newly married. And then on top of that, like we had to sell all of our possessions. We were newly married and we were poor at that time. Like we did not have much money. And so we could not afford to take our things out. So I just like for me, it's important part of the
Yeah,
story.
that is
Like
important.
there was a significant amount of I don't want to say loss, but giving up of
Mhm.
things for me. Like I laid down everything. I mean,
Family,
everything.
financial, relational,
Yeah.
geographical,
We had
cultural.
yeah.
The
We
list goes on.
I want to share this part. Like we had to, because of the financial impact of moving, we had to set, we had just gotten married and we had tons of wedding gifts.
Yeah,
We had
I
a
feel bad
whole
just
condo
thinking about that now.
filled of stuff. And we got rid of it all. And I'm not saying that to be like, oh, poor me. I mean, I know that's a choice we made, but we got rid of that all and packed up a little Honda Civic. That's all we had. So I left my whole entire life and everything
Mm.
with my sweet brand new husband, which I was so excited about. And we went to Texas. And we were so excited because we thought that we were going to go and work, go be with our spiritual parents, who we had a pretty close relationship with, we thought. Go potentially start a ministry school. And there was potential for, right, this amazing job opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I was presented before we left, before we moved, and before I think it was before we made the decision to move. I was presented with a job, opening at a company in Texas, and the company had relocated there from California. It was a smaller company, and it had an opening with a certain role that was presented to me. And I thought, wow, that sounds really exciting. I didn't have any experience in that area of what the job description would entail. So I submitted my resume, but I will say that job was not lined up or at any level certain.
Yeah.
Like it was not in the bag, so to speak, when we moved. Like we still didn't know if I had that job.
Yeah, we had no guarantees.
I had
when we went.
interviewed for it. I think remotely, and then I did an interview there as well.
Yeah.
But the offer itself didn't happen until after we got to Texas. And so that was our introduction into Texas. And we very quickly discovered that what we walked into was not what we thought it was.
Mm.
It was like, I think I'd probably describe it this way. Like when you have lived in the South, you understand humidity in the summertime. Like when you've been in an air conditioned room or a building, and then you open the door and you walk outside, and you're literally slammed in the face with the humidity and the heat. That's what it felt like. It was complete shock to all senses, like spiritually, relationally, professionally, every way imaginable.
Do you remember when we rolled in? I love this. This is such a picture of what we're talking.
I think I know what you're about to say.
We rolled into this little tiny town in Texas. It's really pretty small. Like for me, it is a small town.
It's a lot bigger than the town I grew up in, though.
But it's small.
My town I grew up in, I think there were 5,000 people. Yeah. Which, I mean, that's bigger than some of y'all's towns, but I think this town was
22,000 when we lived there. But let me tell you, I think I knew every single person that lived there. I'm not kidding. Anyways, but back to the original. We roll into town with a flat tire.
Yeah, our tire was like, we had just spent 500 miles between, one stretch of Texas to another, and that's only halfway through, by the way. So yeah, it takes like 1,000 miles to go through. But yeah, we roll in with the flat tire. We pull in, and here we are. The fledgling school of ministry. Wasn't it the school of ministry they had started, had
Yeah,
just
there,
kind of
yeah,
started up?
yeah.
Okay. And so we were kind of thrust into it. Here you are, and here's the here's the school of ministry that you've come to help plant. And I don't know. It's hard for me to even know what level of detail to go into right now.
Me too. Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, this is the hard part of sharing your story, and it's like most people would probably have this worked out before they get here, but
Yeah, but I guess
we're
we're
just,
trying to be raw and real.
yeah,
Um, but let me just say this. So the company I worked for, and you eventually worked for as well.
yeah,
She eventually came on and worked at the company as well. It was a there was a lot of crossover and cross pollination between the people in the company and the people in the school of ministry, and then the people in the church, the kind of the church that people went to. So there was a lot of enmeshment even from the
yes,
beginning where um and I'm getting to a point here. It's like the enmeshment where your work life is combined with your spiritual life, which is combined with your ministry life that you have. And then it's also combined with just going to the grocery store and running into these people,
every day.
whatever
Yeah.
you're doing throughout your regular day to day life. And but I think to kind of set the context here of the environment, we quickly discovered that it was very, very ambitious and unrealistic of us to think that we can come in and just introduce change to a well established environment like that's already doing things a certain way. To think that we can come in and impose that upon that environment was very misaligned.
Well, yeah, and I think we should back up and describe a little bit of that environment. Like, it's not just like a company that has employees. You have to understand
Yeah.
this was, and I will be so bold to say this, very cult-like organization. And it was a business training company. And so the owners were Christians. So there was this weird dynamic of like they moved their company to this small town in Texas and everybody came with them. And everyone who worked there were the like former clients.
Most everybody,
Most of
not
them.
everybody, but a good portion of the people were clients of the company. Yes.
So you had a lot of people, this is an interesting dynamic where you had people that went to these seminars and were very enamored by the leaders and the people teaching the seminars as like, right, they have all the answers up on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And then you have the opportunity to work for them. So there's this weird dynamic in the company where, like you're saying, like everything is mixed. It's not like, oh, this is my job I go to and I come home. You have to understand everybody who worked there, most of the people, I won't say everybody, most of the people who work there were very enamored with the people who work there or the owners. And they worked together, they went to conferences together, they vacationed together, they went to church together, they did everything together. So their whole life was mixed together in
Intertwined.
this.
Yeah.
So that dynamic was very, how would you describe that?
Toxic. Very,
Yes.
very toxic and full of, well, I should say, completely void of boundaries and limits.
Yes. Oh my
It
gosh,
was like
yes.
living in a fishbowl. Everybody lived in a
Yeah.
fishbowl, so everybody knew everybody's business. So and then when it came to making decisions, um, there was no expect. I actually think we had an expectation of privacy, but we found out that there was no privacy
Yeah.
because we would confide in certain people and find out that all of that information that we shared in confidence made its way back to us through all these back channels. So immediately what we learned is nobody's trustworthy. So you literally learn to close off your heart and don't open up to anybody because you don't know what their angle is. You don't know if they're going to use that information to again to harm you or use it against you because we had several situations where that happened.
Yeah.
And when you mix all of that into a spiritual environment, it makes it even more complex because it's not just, hey, go to your job and then go home and suck it up and do your job. It's like everything is mixed together down to your faith. And so we had, we believed we had a calling to come and start and partner with the school of ministry and plant that. But we quickly discovered that we didn't have the same DNA. We did not have the same core values, and that we were not the same type of people.
Yeah, and I think we need to clarify because it's kind of hard when you share your stories. They don't always make sense, but
Yeah,
we had our spiritual parents that we had a relationship with prior, and that the school was with them. So that was kind of a separate thing. And then
yeah,
we have the business over here, this Christian biz training
company.
company. So the spiritual parents worked at the company, okay? And then we worked at the company. And then there's all this crossover, right? If that makes sense. So they're two separate things, but same people involved in them.
Yeah,
And then I think what makes it, like you're saying, like the boundaries and the feeling like you had to keep everything private. Like on top of that, we were required to go to events. Being employees, you're required to go to these events, and
the
that
seminars.
that would need a whole episode to talk about
Yeah,
what goes on in those events. The types of things that were taught, and the mixture of business and spirituality that gets really messy and convoluted and very toxic and honestly
yeah,
dangerous.
very dangerous.
Um,
Yes, it can be weaponized.
yeah,
It
and
was
it
weaponized.
was. And so there was a lot of emphasis, right, on going to these events. And it was like the event's free to go to the event, but you have to pay for your hotel and your gas and your food and your lodging and all these things.
But all of that, those expectations were not clearly stated. So you kind of had to, you had to figure that stuff out yourself and figure out, there's all of these unwritten rules, unspoken rules that you sort of navigate, and you lose if you do and you lose if you don't type of thing. And you quickly learn how and why people become so reclusive and untrusting of others.
Yeah, and it's the double bind that happens in
That's what I'm saying.
cults and toxic faith communities. It's do this and don't do this.
Yeah, except it's
Um,
not written out.
yes.
There's no manual or playbook that tells you. You have to kind of learn by trial and error. And trust me, when you do it and you do it wrong, there is hell to pay.
Yeah, well, let
There's a
me give you an
lot.
example of a double bind. So
Yeah.
the organization was really big on paying off debt, which was good. Like I'm not saying like there's always good in cults. There's always good
Is there
parts.
always good?
There are good pieces in
Maybe so.
cults. There's
Okay.
good pieces in. Okay, someone might disagree with me.
I'm thinking about that. Maybe you're right.
So
I've never
maybe we
thought of
might
it.
disagree, but
I've never
there's
thought of
good
it that
in
way.
there. That's what makes you think that, oh, maybe there's nothing wrong because look at all this good. So people are paying off debt.
We were.
People, yeah,
We paid off a lot of
there
debt.
was a lot of emphasis on getting out of debt, which I'm thankful for
I
that
am too.
part.
That's one of the nuggets.
We learned some good things about really good things about money
Finance.
and
Yeah.
finance that have served us really well.
Mm-hmm.
To me, I'd say that's the God piece out of the crap. But anyways,
Right.
getting back to like there was a lot of emphasis on paying off debt. So you've got all these teachings about paying off debt where it's to the point where like if you used a credit card or you had a car loan, you were like looked down upon.
Anathema.
You were like
Yeah.
you were terrified to do that.
And there was almost a social, like a collective
Yeah.
social shaming. I remember when we
Yes.
bought, we went in and we bought a car because we had our little Honda Civic, and Honda Civics, man, they'll run till a million miles, rice rocking meat going down the road. But we got to a point where like we gotta buy another car. Like, and it was kind of accepted in the circles we were in that families had one car, even if you had kids, and you just shuttle everybody around. And so we were 3 years into that, and we're like, we can't do this anymore. You have your business. I had my work was very demanding, and I was
Yes.
traveling internationally
Yes.
all the time, and nationally and everywhere else. And it's just the job took up a lot of space, and so we decided we're going to buy another car. And I'll never forget going into the bank, and it's a little local bank, Texas bank. And it wasn't called Texas Bank, but it was a Texas bank. Is what I'm trying to say. So if y'all trying to look up what bank it wasn't called Texas Bank. Anyway, and we went in and the loan officer said, "Oh, you're buying an older car."
For us, we were like, oh my gosh, this new car.
and that would have been what? That was 2014.
Yeah.
Because we had been there 3 years at that point. And the car was a 2005, and we actually just got rid of it like 2 months ago. So we had it 10 years. But he said that, we're kind of like, oh, that kind of stung a little bit. He's like, yeah, you got an older one. But to the rest of the people that we were working with and we were doing, kind of living around and everything, they were like, you could just almost feel like, oh, y'all went into debt to buy a car.
Yeah, we didn't want to tell anybody. Like, you didn't want to tell anyone anything like that. But yeah, so we were told like it was the double bind, right? You got to get out of debt. You have to pay cash for everything. And then yet come to all these events that we're running and you need to
On
pay
the
for
credit
your
card.
way. And I'm like, wait, which one is it? Like,
On the credit card.
I need to pay off you're telling me I need to pay off my debt and all these things, right? You're beating in my head about money, but then when it benefits you, I should do it. So it was like that's the double bind, and it becomes confusing when you're in environments like that. And again, we'll unpack. There's a
Yeah,
lot to
there's
unpack
so
with,
much to unpack. Yeah, so gosh, I don't even know how to land it from here, but I'll just say this: the longer we were there, the more trauma we experienced. Like
yes.
it was layers. It
Yeah.
was so many layers of trauma, so many so many walls that we put up to relate to the people that we were around every day. And I just remember we bought a house there and we had like a couple acres. And that was like such a refuge for us because
Mm-hmm.
we'd go back to our house and we'd be like, this is our safe place.
Yeah.
And we'd do day drives and trips over our region of Texas. And it was honestly, I do miss that. I love that part of Texas for that reason.
Yeah.
But the point being, like, we had to really be intentional about cultivating our safe space together at home, in the
Yeah.
middle of this very unsafe, toxic, enmeshed, high control, spiritual, professional, financial
Mm.
environment. And then I will add too, like to add insult to injury, the area we were in was very, very, how would you describe it? Like just the people in general there.
Well, that's what I wanted to say too. Like most people like are like, oh, if you had a community that was toxic, you would kind of like, well, just find another church or
Find it,
just
yeah,
this community was so small and infiltrated. Like I worked at that company for a while. I also had a hair business in the community, and let me tell you, everybody
knows,
knew everybody. And so there really wasn't a way to get away from it. And so
yeah,
even if you found new people, we had to be silent because this person was like a kind of semi well-known person in this community, almost like I don't want to say, well, famous, kind of a
okay,
famous person,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Semi-famous
I would
person.
say so,
Yes.
yeah,
So very well-known person. So not only do we have to kind of like we couldn't talk about this because we needed to keep the secrets to help right this person's reputation. We worked for them. Our livelihood was dependent on
yeah,
being a part of this organization. And so it wasn't as simple as just going and meeting other people. And I'll be honest, we both have lived a lot of different places. Like by then I had already lived in three different parts of my state, like three different cities.
right,
You had lived in different states.
yeah,
When Jesus said dust your feet off of a town, I never understood that scripture until I lived in that town. And that's not to say there weren't great people. We
yeah,
met a lot of really
yes,
great people in our community that were part of that community,
yeah, that
but
are
we couldn't
awesome.
actually connect with them in the ways we would have wanted because of all the oppression and I would say cult like stuff that was going on.
Yeah,
We couldn't actually be our authentic selves.
that's it.
We were taught that to say anything was gossip and slander. And so we were terrified.
No critical
We
thinking.
were terrified to be honest with people about what was going on. And so we held these deeply traumatic experiences inside. And
Until now.
until now. And then I just want to remember something because you said the town. So,
Yeah.
yeah, working in the community, again, I met some nice people, but there's a lot of the Bible Belt's very interesting.
There's the Bible Belt and there's the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
This Bible Belt, that belt, that part of the belt, I think was the end of it that whips people.
Yeah. It was
It's
very,
different than where I
yeah.
grew up. I mean, not to say there's not plenty of issues where I grew up, but there were differences too, right? Like,
Here's what I would say. Not friendly towards outsiders. If
yeah,
you
that's
are
it.
not part of there was a system of mode of operating in that town. If you ran a business, you had to know the people there and you had to kind of get in the circles. And if
Yeah.
you were not in, you
You're
were
out.
out. So you can add that dynamic to it too. It's not just this company and it's not just these relationships, it's this community that we live in. So there was no reprieve anywhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Except our house.
except our house and our marriage. Like, thank God, like we went really deep. We didn't have family near us.
No.
We had friends. Again, like I love so many of the people. Some of you are that are watching this are people from that community, and we love you. Like, you guys are amazing. But that time overshadowed our ability to be able to really have relationship.
Yeah.
There's so much there. And I think
So
the
much.
nature of even the people in our community, I feel like some of them maybe did better than we did.
Mhm.
But the nature of the work that you were doing, because you worked for one of the top people, we had to keep so much private that other people didn't know about.
Yeah, I was sworn to secrecy. Couldn't talk about it, and I mean, confidentiality is confidentiality, but
Right.
it took a toll
Yeah.
on me personally, frankly. Like I had to keep a lot
Yeah.
close to the vest that I could not talk about.
Yeah.
And it was it was a very heavy burden.
And seeing inconsistencies. I'm not talking about anything illegal here, so I just want to make that clear. Nothing illegal, but ethically, I would say, like seeing people show a face in one setting and then behind closed doors another,
Mhm.
having to carry that burden
The cognitive dissonance is
is
enormous.
overwhelming. And again, it's hearing people's stories, trauma stories. It's like, well, why didn't you leave? Why didn't you say anything?
That's a whole episode.
That makes sense that you would think that outside looking in. It's a different experience to actually live it. And again, like if you want to understand more about trauma, you should read The Body Keeps the Score. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it
You
is.
were like, there were so many things about that were very overwhelming and terrifying that we're not even going into right now because we're just trying to give you
Kind of the overview, scratching the surface, trying to give the I guess the chapters, right, of our story.
Yeah.
And then we can unpack more.
Yeah,
as we go down.
yeah. And like Adam said, we had 4 years of that. And so, golly, by the time it was time to leave,
It was time.
I was ready.
It was sad though too, because we loved our house so much. And walking away, I remember we both cried. I think,
Yeah.
when we left the house that last time. And I think too, like just to point to how deeply embedded in your body and your soul and everywhere, every realm, a safe place becomes.
Yeah, that's so
Like, a
true.
refuge.
Yeah.
Dude, if you find a place that's safe, you're going to latch onto that with everything you got, especially if everything around you is unsafe.
Oh, that's such a
So,
good point.
We did that with our home,
Yeah.
and I miss that house,
I do too. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe one day we'll go back and visit, but we haven't.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we covered a lot. That was a good rundown.
Yeah. I feel like I got the wheel turning where it's like you want to keep going, but it's like
Yeah,
we're kind of at an hour, so we'll have to save it. But
we'll wrap it for now. But we appreciate y'all kind of coming along. This is the first time we've talked about this publicly, so bear with us if it's hard to follow or bumpy or
yeah.
maybe it's not as perfect as you'd want it to be, but this is just us trying to unpack our story.
Yeah.
So hopefully you find it helpful. Hopefully you connect with it. And please stay tuned because we've got so much more we want to share. So
Yeah.
we appreciate you being here. And please, as always, contact us if you have any feedback, any questions, any comments. Please don't give us any nasty comments. We don't really want nasty. Had enough nasty comments. But if you disagree, please tell us. If you have a different perspective, please tell us. You can email us at gritinthewild@gmail.com. So that's GRITINWI. Oh, whoops, I skipped the word. GRITINTHEWILD@gmail.com. Or hit us up on the socials or whatever other method.
I think we're just on Insta.
We're
right?
on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. You can find me at Adam Short 143. And yeah, that ought to cover it. But we appreciate y'all being here, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks.